Welcome in, psychology students. Professor Zeeb here again, and we're going to continue on with our Cluster B personality disorders. And the one we're covering, of course, as you can see, is the histrionic personality disorder. Okay, so just to kind of summarize these individuals quickly, they tend to be overly dramatic or theatrical in their manner. Some people would describe them as a drama queen or drama king, depending on the case. So someone who likes to be on center stage, loves attention, and seems to be overly dramatic in nature. All right, however, let's look at our official clinical description of this disorder according to the DSM. So they tend to be overly dramatic and sensational. So, for example, this may be someone that cries uncontrollably, when they're watching a sad movie, for example, or going through life's difficulties. This is someone, this is something from the textbook. They mentioned that it's the kind of person that will hug someone who they've just met. In other words, they seem to be very, upfront and emotional in that way. Research also shows that they may be sexually provocative. So, in terms of the way they act or the way that they dress, they are often viewed as being seductive in their appearance and behavior, and often dressed to impress. So, if you think about people you know in your life, possibly that may fit that description where they're kind of just going over the top in terms of their sexuality. They're often described as being impulsive and the need to be the center of attention, the life of the party. In other words, this is someone who loves the limelight. They love the focus to be on them and will sort of suck that in and really enjoy that. In other words, we may describe them as being unhappy when they're not getting the limelight. They may constantly seek reassurance and approval and really want praise from people. And furthermore, uh, speaking to the impulsive aspect of this, they may be unable to delay gratification. So, in other words, they want instant recognition or instant praise for something, as an example. Thinking and emotions are often perceived to be as shallow. So, for example, this may be someone who's overly concerned with their looks. In other words, they're kind of focusing on that aspect of themselves rather than deeper qualities of a person. The textbook mentions that they often view different concepts in life as being black or white. In other words, just sort of very basic in nature. For example, they may say something like, oh, this is a great political leader, but they don't have any evidence to back it up or explanation why. So, in other words, it may be very sort of superficial and shallow in terms of how they think about things and how they view life in general. We do see some gender differences with this one. So the research is showing that it's definitely more common or commonly diagnosed in females. Okay. So some people believe that could be due to the bias in our culture of focusing on emotions and femininity. But if we look at the sheer numbers, we're finding that more than likely they are female, but not obvious, not always. Okay, so let's look at next. We're going to look at the causes of histrionic personality disorder. And believe it or not, even though this disorder has been around for quite a while, the etiology is unknown due to lack of research. So there's not a lot of studies that have examined the causes of this particular disorder. The research does show that they're often uh, dual diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. So it often occurs with that particular personality disorder. So, for example, there's some research showing that where they found two-thirds of people who have histrionic personality disorder, they've been diagnosed with that, also meet the criteria for antisocial personality disorder. So there seems to be some kind of connection among these two disorders. And so, because of that, some psychologists theorize that it may be a feminine variant of the antisocial traits. In other words, you could argue that sometimes histrionic people can be manipulative to get what they want, whether it's attention or the limelight, for example. So this may be, theoretically, once again, this may be the feminine version or the female version of antisocial personality because there's a lot of common denominators between these two. So maybe they're both part of the same problem. They're just sort of, we're looking at it as a feminine and a masculine diagnosis with that. However, we need more research to truly confirm that and to say that whether they're different or the same or whatever it is. But the common feel right now is that they may be part of the same problem, but just due to different aspects of society, they may be viewed as different things. All right, so that will conclude our really short lecture here on histrionic. So make sure you read the next blurb there in terms of the treatment of histrionic and to progress in the class.